My in-laws built a full apartment in our basement without permission while we were on vacation. My response changed our family dynamic forever. I, 38M, never imagined that a 2-week vacation to Europe would completely upend my family life. My wife and I had been saving for this trip for years, our first real getaway since buying our house. We were excited to explore Italy, leaving behind work stress and the constant home renovation projects that had consumed our weekends. Before leaving, we'd asked my wife's parents to check on the house occasionally. Just water the plants, bring in the mail, the usual stuff. They had a spare key for emergencies, something I was initially hesitant about, but eventually agreed to because, well, family is family. Looking back, I should have trusted my instincts. The trip itself was amazing. 2 weeks of pasta, wine, and historic sights, a perfect escape. My wife seemed happier than I'd seen her in months, away from her demanding job and her even more demanding family. We joked about accidentally missing our flight home. When we finally returned, jet-lagged but refreshed, I noticed something odd immediately. There were fresh tire tracks in our driveway, and our normally empty trash cans were full. I didn't think too much of it. Maybe her parents had cleaned something while checking on the place. Then we walked in the front door. The house smelled different. Not bad, just different. Like someone had been cooking unfamiliar foods. And there was a faint sound coming from somewhere. Music? Do you hear that? I asked my wife, setting down our bags. She nodded, looking confused. It's coming from downstairs. Our basement had been unfinished when we left. Just concrete floors, exposed beams, and boxes of holiday decorations. We'd talked about eventually converting it into a rec room, but that was years down the road. As we approached the basement door, the music grew louder. My wife opened it, and we both froze at the top of the stairs. The walls had been drywalled and painted a soft beige. The concrete floor was now covered with laminate wood flooring. And at the bottom of the stairs stood my mother-in-law, holding a coffee mug, looking startled to see us. "Oh, you're home early," she said, though we weren't. We'd arrived exactly when planned. We descended the stairs in shock. What had been an empty basement was now essentially a fully functional apartment. Kitchen area with cabinets, countertops, and appliances. Living space with a sofa, TV, and coffee table. A bathroom with shower. And beyond that, a bedroom with a queen-sized bed already made up with my mother-in-law's familiar floral bedding. My father-in-law emerged from the bathroom, equally surprised to see us. "Welcome home." Surprised. I looked at my wife, expecting her to be as shocked and upset as I was. Instead, she seemed confused but not entirely displeased. "What is all this?" she asked her parents. "Well," her mother began, setting down her coffee. "We thought about what you said about wanting us closer as we get older. And since you have all this in used space." My head was spinning. My wife had never mentioned wanting her parents closer. In fact, we'd specifically bought this house because it was a comfortable 45-minute drive from her family. Close enough for visits, but far enough for independence. "When did we discuss this?" I asked my wife quietly. She avoided my eyes. "I might have mentioned something to Mom about helping them eventually when they can't manage their house anymore." Eventually, I emphasized. "Not now, and not without discussing it with me first." My father-in-law clapped me on the shoulder. "We wanted to surprise you both. Saved you all the construction hassle. My buddy owns a contracting company, got us a great deal. Did most of it ourselves anyway. How did you even get permits for this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. The glance my in-laws exchanged told me everything. "You didn't get permits," I stated flatly. "Don't worry about that." My mother-in-law waved dismissively. "It's family helping family." I took a deep breath, overwhelmed by the implications. Unpermitted construction. Potential code violations. Impact on our home insurance and property value. Not to mention the complete invasion of our privacy and disregard for our autonomy. "We need to talk," I said to my wife, gesturing upstairs. She nodded, but first turned to her parents. "It looks beautiful, but we're really tired from the flight. Can we discuss everything tomorrow?" Her father nodded. "Of course. We'll stay out of your hair tonight. We have most of our things moved in already, but we can finish up tomorrow." The realization hit me like a truck. They weren't just showing us a renovation. They had already moved in. Upstairs in our bedroom with the door closed, I tried to remain calm. "Did you know about this?" I asked my wife. "No, not exactly," she replied, sitting on our bed. "I told them a few months ago that when they get older, they could maybe stay with us instead of a retirement home. But I never said now, and I definitely didn't suggest remodeling our basement without asking." I paced the room, trying to process. "They've moved in, without permits, without permission. Do you understand what this means legally? For our insurance? For our marriage?" She looked down. "I know it's not ideal." "Not ideal," I interrupted. "They've essentially broken into our house and made permanent changes without our consent. How would you feel if my parents did this to you?" She was quiet for a moment. You're right. I'll talk to them tomorrow. But I knew from experience that my wife's talks with her parents rarely resulted in boundaries being established. They'd ignore her concerns, tell her she was overreacting, and proceed as planned, as they always had. I barely slept that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people moving around in what was supposed to be my home. In the morning, I called in sick to work. This needed to be dealt with immediately. Over breakfast, with my in-laws happily making themselves at home in our kitchen, I laid out my position clearly. I appreciate that you wanted to help. I began, choosing my words carefully, but this was not okay. You can't just rebuild parts of someone else's house without permission, permits, or proper planning. My mother-in-law laughed lightly. Oh, don't be so dramatic. We've improved your home's value, and now we can help with the mortgage. I looked at my wife, expecting support. She looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. That's not the point, I continued. This is about respect and boundaries. We need to talk about next steps. My father-in-law frowned. Next steps? We're all moved in. What's there to discuss? I took a deep breath. For starters, we need to get proper permits retroactively, or we could face serious fines. Second, we need to discuss if this living arrangement is actually what everyone wants. Of course it's what everyone wants, my mother-in-law said dismissively. Our daughter has always wanted us closer. Haven't you, dear? My wife squirmed in her seat. I do love you both, but this is very sudden. We should have talked about it first. Her mother waved her hand. Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. You too would have overthought it. That was the moment something snapped inside me. 20 years of dealing with their boundary violations, their dismissive attitudes, their manipulation of my wife, all crystallized into perfect clarity. I want you both to move out by the end of the month, I said calmly. The kitchen went silent. You can't be serious, my father-in-law finally said. I am. This is our house. You can't just move in without our agreement. The basement needs to be inspected and properly permitted, and we need time and space to decide what we actually want. My mother-in-law turned to my wife. Are you going to let him talk to us this way? After all we've done for you? I watched my wife, holding my breath. This was the moment. Would she finally stand up to her parents, or would she capitulate as she always had? She looked at her mother, then at me, then down at her hands. I think he's right, Mom. This was too much. The look of shock on her parents' faces would have been comical in any other situation. We'll pay for any expenses to help you move back to your house, I added, softening slightly. And we can discuss future living arrangements when the time is right, with everyone's input. What followed was 3 weeks of the most intense family drama I've ever experienced. My in-laws initially refused to leave, claiming they'd already sold their house. They hadn't. It was another lie. My wife's siblings called to berate us for throwing our parents out on the street. Extended family members I'd never even met sent messages about family loyalty. Through it all, my wife surprised me. For the first time in our marriage, she held firm against her family's manipulation. We presented a united front, insisting on the same boundaries despite the emotional warfare. In the end, my in-laws did move out, though not without significant damage to family relationships. We discovered they'd cut corners on the renovation that could have been dangerous: improper electrical work, no vapor barriers in the bathroom. We ended up spending thousands fixing their improvements to meet code requirements. 6 months later, things have settled into a new normal. My wife and I attend family gatherings, but they're tense affairs. Her parents barely speak to me and treat her with wounded disappointment. Some relatives have taken sides, creating awkward divisions. But something unexpected happened, too. My wife seems lighter somehow, more confident. After decades of putting her parents' feelings above her own, she's learning to prioritize our marriage and her own needs. We're in couples therapy, working through the damage this incident caused and strengthening our communication. As for the basement, we've properly finished it, with permits, into a comfortable guest space. Her parents have visited exactly once, staying just one night before claiming they were more comfortable in their own home. Looking back, I realized that what seemed like a disaster actually forced necessary changes in our family dynamic. My in-laws no longer feel entitled to override our decisions. My wife no longer feels responsible for managing her parents' emotions. And I no longer feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Sometimes it takes a crisis to break unhealthy patterns. Our vacation didn't just give us memories of Italy. It gave us the shock we needed to rebuild our marriage on stronger foundations. I don't regret standing firm, even with the fallout. Some relationships need to change to survive, and sometimes those changes hurt before they heal. The basement incident, as we now call it, taught us all a valuable lesson about boundaries, respect, and communication. It nearly broke us, but in the end, it made us stronger, even if the path forward looks different than any of us expected. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.